you may be in this situation where your kids are not getting along, or the stepchildren are not getting along together, and you're like, man, we shouldn't have gotten married. This is not working.
Yeah.
And the reality is no, they're just 10, and all 10-year-olds tend to have issues with their siblings.
Yeah.
So love what you said about expectations, because there does need to be the expectation that kids need to be kids. Your blended family has a 100% chance of success when you do it God's way.
We are Blended Kingdom Families, and we want to provide biblical resources to heal and restore families with a message of hope for the next generation.
Let's get after it. Hey guys, welcome to the VKF Podcast, or welcome back to the VKF Podcast. We're excited that you're here as we continue the series on Sibling Unity.
Yes.
And looking at those complexities within your blended family. Again, if you haven't already, take an opportunity, like, share, comment. We'd love to hear from you. You can be notified every single week when a new podcast drops on Monday. So, last week we talked about how to create bonding with siblings.
Yes.
Today we're going to dive into maybe the other side, which is, what do you do when they don't get along?
Yeah.
Like, you literally have chaos or arguments or fighting or whatever that may be.
Yeah.
You can just look at this, and I've seen couples that I've counseled, they're like, we got married a year ago, our kids do not get along, and they're starting to question their own marriage because they feel like it's just been a failure. And I think a lot of blended families look at that way.
Well, and it can be unity between siblings is something that takes time. We said that last week, and we build up this expectation. So expectations, Scott, you have a saying that says expectation, death by expectation.
Death by expectation.
Death by
Absolutely.
expectation. And so when we start placing expectations on sibling unity and for them to get along right away and to have this awesome relationship, we're placing an expectation on them that they may not be able to deliver, or it may not even be something that they truly understand, or maybe that they even want. Maybe it's that these children now go to the same school. They have, separate friends. They're in separate activities. They're very different, because social groups for kids can play a huge part in their development and how they communicate with one another. So, that can be something that could be going on, or, that's difficult with the siblings within the blended family. So, again, you guys, we want to understand that sometimes kids need time to build bonds and those trust. And we as parents just need to be cognizant to lay those expectations at bay.
Yeah. Well, and understand that sometimes kids just don't get along. And I want to point this out, because I think blended families, we all suffer from this. And I want to make sure that we put air back in the room. Not every problem is a blended family problem.
Sure.
Some problems are just their kids.
Yeah.
And, we have 3 boys who are, they argue. I mean, different from Michael, but the 3, they argue, and sometimes they fight.
Yeah.
And that's just because they're young, they're selfish. They're, they look at self first. I mean, they haven't developed emotional intelligence. You may be in this situation where your kids are not getting along, or, the stepchildren are not getting along together, and you're like, man, we shouldn't have gotten married. This is not working.
Yeah.
And the reality is no, they're just 10, and, all 10-year-olds tend to have issues with their siblings.
Yeah.
So love what you said about expectations, because there does need to be expectation that kids need to be kids, and that not every problem is a blended family problem.
Yeah. And one thing that we always encourage, being, mental health professionals, is family counseling, or counseling with the kids. I know that that we have several families that come in with that. One specific family, mom and dad have been married for about a year now, so they're newly blended, and both of their teens are girls and not getting along.
Yeah.
And so they came in, individually and as a family together to try to work through that. And so I think that's another option when you've kind of exhausted your options as a family, and when you notice that it's starting to affect your marriage or other relationships in the blended family, when when the unity is no longer present and the peace is no longer there, understand that there are people out there, like mentors at church, or pastors, or biblical counselors, that can help give you guys tools to walk that out in your family. And it may be that the kids are just in this season, their family, they just got they're newly blended and they're like, what in the world is this? Like, what if they're having to share a room and they're teenagers? Like, teens, at a certain point, they're building identity. They're understanding who they are as a person. And now they have this new person that's in their life. And sometimes they just don't know how to process or deal with that.
Well, and a lot of times they're still processing the pain of the divorce.
Absolutely.
We've seen this countless numbers of times where you have this immense excitement about your newly blended family, and you tend to forget that these children had no desire to be in a divorced family.
Yeah.
They had no desire to be in a new family together.
Yep.
So a lot of times, and I'm glad you brought up counseling, because one of the things that we're so passionate about is really dismissing the myths around counseling and the how scary it can be, or how even traumatizing it can be for kids to go to counseling.
Sure.
It's not traumatizing at all. A great counselor is going to be a tremendous asset to your children, but you have to acknowledge the fact that these kids may not share your excitement.
Yeah.
Therefore, they may not share the excitement of the relationship they have with their new siblings.
Yeah.
Especially after the newness wears off.
Yes. Yeah.
A lot of kids are excited because they're like, oh, I get new friends, or I have, I have somebody else that can, play with me or whatever. And then all of a sudden you're like, you have to share.
Yeah.
And this is another wrinkle. What if they were an only child?
Oh.
And then all of a sudden,
sudden,
if you've been an only child, I was raised a lot of my life as an only child. So you get a selfishness about you that is just, it is real.
Yes.
And all of a sudden you have to share.
Yeah.
And you have to coexist with another child and share the attention of your parent. I mean, tell me what that was like for you.
Yeah. I mean, I remember that. I remember all of a sudden I had to share my mom with my stepdad, and I now had a stepsister that, we had her events to go to. And so it shifted from a lot of the focus being on me to then sharing and sacrificing and really learning what that was. I think one of the beautiful things about blended family is we truly understand what sacrifice is with children transitioning to homes. And then when you bring in, new siblings, new step parents, sacrificing time and even experiences. And so, going back to, building the unity, a lot of people in blended families, the case is that they do have unity with their children and their stepchildren, and they want to just know, how do we foster that and make it even better than what it is, or make it stronger? Yeah. And so, because I know we've been talking a lot about, if they're not getting along, but, if they are getting along well, just in continuing to encourage that relationship and providing, again, opportunities for them to bond and to have those shared experiences together.
Well, you find what they enjoy doing and do more of it.
Yeah.
I mean, that's really what it amounts to, is you do an exploration process of going, okay, how many things do these guys agree with?
Yeah.
Do they agree that they like the same sports team? Do they agree that, they enjoy the same style of clothes? Do they agree that they both like hiking outside? Whatever the agreement is, as their parents, do a discovery mission to figure that out. Yeah. Because again, if you look at the psychology of it, people are going to assess when they're enjoying something to who they're enjoying it with, to a better relationship. So find things that they enjoy doing together and continue to highlight that. Yeah. Highlight that. Find out their love language. Are they do they have the same love language? Do they have different love languages?
Yes.
That you need to make sure that you're not creating a rivalry situation within the siblings. So these things are, again, they take a lot of intentionality. Yeah. And again, I think so many blended families just kind of go, okay, we're married. Here's the house. Hey, here's your room. Enjoy it. Get ready for school tomorrow. Yeah. And these kids are like, what?
Yeah. Well, and I know we're coming to a close, Scott, but just give us some practical tips for any parents that are listening today and they're like, man, my biological children and stepchildren cannot get along. Like, what are just some practical things that they could maybe implement, and even some spiritual things that they could do to just maybe just help ease the situation just a little bit?
So I would start by, I'll always start in prayer, asking the Holy Spirit to give you the right words to say, because my next step is going to be communication. So I always go back to the Holy Spirit and say, hey, listen, this is the desire of my heart. I want to be in line with what your desires for my heart are. And so help me speak the right words. And then having that conversation with the siblings or with the kids individually. Hey, I notice you guys aren't getting along. You know, we're a family. We're building, acknowledge the fact that you're building something new. Acknowledge the fact that they may have been grieving the past.
Yeah.
But nevertheless, I think people always want to live in unity with other people.
Absolutely.
So acknowledge that to them, but ask them, hey, what can we do that would help you guys build a better relationship?
Yeah.
And they may say, well, I don't want to share a room. Okay, well, let's work toward a solution to that.
Sure.
Or ask them what they enjoy doing together. So have open communication. And I would always suggest like maybe having those conversations individually.
Yeah.
Before you may have them as a group together, just so you can be armed with the right information, so you can communicate as a collective group.
That's good.
So you're basically coming together and saying, you know, at the end, saying, hey, listen, I know that you guys really like doing this, and hey, how about we go do this today?
Yeah.
And all of a sudden, you've got a positive agreement of these siblings.
Yep, that's good.
The other thing I would do is make sure you're in constant communication with your new spouse about this.
Yeah.
Don't let this overshadow your marriage, and don't let it become a source of contention, which normally happens.
Yes, very
I have
big.
seen this many times where, you know, and we can always talk about discipline and things that are different in siblings, and that always causes strife and disunity. But have open communication with your spouse of, hey, I see this going on.
Yeah.
What suggestions do you have? What suggestions can we work towards?
No, I think that's good. And then one thing that I would say before we end is I think celebrate each of the children in front of the other. And I know that some parents have dealt with situations where this has caused jealousy, but I think when parents themselves can be a united front and both parents are celebrating both sets of kids or acknowledging and pointing out the things that they're doing well and do that in front of one of the other, it can show your biological children and stepchildren things about one another that they didn't know and really highlight some special things about them. So it's like, hey, you did great job, you know, at your game, like love that you made that touchdown or whatever, you know, and, or you made a great grade on your exam, things like that, where you can celebrate the children in front of them. And I think it gives them opportunity to celebrate one another as well.
Yeah. Guys, I hope you've enjoyed this. Next week, we're going to dive deeper into something we just touched on here, which is when you have significant age differences.
Yes.
And we've got a lot of things to say here. Both of us really grew up in that situation.
Yeah.
So if you have kids that are 10, 12 years apart and you're like, I don't know how to do this, that's what we're going to dive into next week. Guys, hope you have a wonderful day and y'all have a great one.
Be blessed in all that you do.
Hey guys, so glad you were here with us today, and I hope you enjoyed today's episode.
And you can find more resources from Blended Kingdom Families at blendedkingdomfamilies.com. Join us again next time as we hang out with more amazing podcast guests. And remember, nothing will be impossible with God.